Here we go. Hi, Zoe.
Hello, Megzy.
How are you, darling?
I'm not bad. How are you?
I'm really good.
Great.
I've had the biggest week ever. Grand final week was just a behemoth. Uh, but it was honestly so epic. Just everything that I managed to cram into the week was just so fun, so epic, so many human interactions, maybe a little bit too much. I was an absolute corpse on Sunday, just decompressing from it all. But I just feel, I know I say this every time we sit down and record, but I'm just so grateful. Like, I'm so grateful that I have the opportunity to do the work that I do and be involved with such iconic, huge events like Grand Final Week. And I just had so much fun. And yeah, it was epic.
Amazing. I don't know how you did it.
I
I
don't
was
either.
watching from afar, being like, "Oh my goodness, is she even going to show up today?" So I'm glad that you're here. Yeah, I've been keeping it very wholesome. Actually, I went to one of my really good friends' hens on the weekend. It was so fun, but as I often do, I went sober, which some people can't wrap their head around. But I had such a good time, and still woke up on Sunday feeling fresh as a daisy. It was so nice.
I love that you can do that. And it
Mm.
is, we spoke a lot about it in the conversation and the topic Sober Curious.
Mm.
And it is certainly something in this society that we live in where it is as soon as the sun starts shining, and I tell you, as soon as the sun started shining on grand final day, I was like, I'm ready for a vino. And it was nice, to be honest. It felt like a bit of a reward, but like I really admire that you can go and and be as social as you are and do that. And it's amazing to know how many more people are jumping on that kind of
Mm.
sober curious and that
Yeah.
sober
Well,
train. It's
actually,
possible.
yeah, and it made it so much easier because my best friend, shout out to Hanny, has just moved back to Melbourne. She hasn't lived in Melbourne in like many years, and she stopped drinking around the same time as me, actually, and she also doesn't drink. And so now we get to go to social things together sober, which is really nice. I didn't tell her that, so she'll probably hear this for the first time, but it's so nice to have you back, Hanny. Not just for that reason, obviously. Should we start with our breath?
Yeah, let's
Yeah.
do it. Wherever you are, just take a moment here. You may want to close your eyes. You may not want to close your eyes, but just wherever you are for a second, just settle and take a really deep and nourishing breath into your belly through your nose and just let it all go.
Before we start this episode, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we're recording today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, the same land in which I've always had the privilege of calling home. I extend my deepest respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, always was and always will be Aboriginal land.
Let's go.
What are we talking about again?
We are
No.
talking about the pressures of beauty standards that and the upkeep and the money that it costs and what happens as you get older
Mm.
to your body and your hair and your nipples and all these things. So that's what we're talking about today.
Oh my God, yeah. And I've wanted to have this conversation right from the beginning, actually. And it's really stemmed from my personal experience because I am starting to go grey in my hair. And, I know that this happens at different ages for different people, just depending. And to be honest, I feel grateful that I've made it this long because I think my mum actually went grey a lot earlier than I have. So grateful to have gotten this far, but it's starting to become quite obvious. And I'm just noticing myself just wishing that I didn't care, firstly. I see other people who have just kind of who don't care. And I'm like, oh my God, you look beautiful. But then for myself, I'm like, oh, now I have to start dyeing my hair. And I have not dyed my hair in a really long time. I used to dye my hair when I was in high school when I had like balayage. I remember actually, this is a good story. Once one of my best friends, Becky, got my ponytail and dunked it into a bucket of bleach to balayage my hair.
There's none of that going on these days.
I will.
It would have been a cheap and effective way to go about it.
I will somehow share a photo of that balayage job. It was as horrific as it sounds. So yeah, I've had my natural hair color for so long, and now I'm like, oh my gosh, there's just another thing that I'm going to have to add to my, monthly or quarterly list of, upkeep in order to feel good about myself. And, I can zoom out and recognize that, well, that's a choice. But I think it's something that we all grapple with. And whether it's your hair or whether it's other, beauty standards that you feel really pressured by, I think that that it keeps us rushing. It keeps us rushing because there's an endless list of things to do. And yeah, to your point, it costs money and it also costs time. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Well, I guess it's a good opportunity to begin with asking that question, actually. And I don't know, maybe have you just answered it with that, or is there something else on top of that at the moment that's keeping you rushing this week, Zoe? Because as we know, we do like to start each episode by kind of acknowledging where we're at and what's keeping our mind and our spirits moving.
Yeah, so I jumped the gun, didn't I?
You did, but that's okay.
I forgot about
reeled
the
it
question.
back.
So what's keeping me rushing at the moment? So this will be a little bit out of context because by the time this episode comes out, this whole experience will be been and done. But at the moment, I am in heavy preparation for my annual yoga retreat in Sri Lanka. So I've probably mentioned this before at some point, but I run a retreat in Sri Lanka every year, which was born from a time in my life when I moved over to Sri Lanka to work over there for a little bit. And yeah, now I take a group back to experience my happy place, essentially. So that's coming up in 2 weeks' time. I have maybe 15 all women coming along for, a 7-day yoga retreat. And whilst, of course, I'm looking forward to the moment where I get on the plane and I know that I'm heading over to my happy place, there is so much that goes into something like that because essentially I'm going into 7 full days and nights of hosting, kind of hosting a group of people, facilitating a lot of yoga and breath work and meditation and journaling and other kinds of workshops, and probably a bit of surf coaching in there. And yeah, it's a surf and yoga retreat, I should mention, and the rest. So there is a lot of planning and preparation because this is my third retreat. This is my 5th time back in Sri Lanka, but my 3rd retreat of this kind. I definitely have a template already that I work from, but I always customize the experience each time to where I'm at in my practice. For me, when I teach, it has to feel authentic. So I can't just rinse and repeat what I've done on other years. I have to recraft the experience to make it feel really aligned. So I've intentionally booked my flights to be a little bit earlier than I probably should and could go. But I figure if I just get myself out of the country into Sri Lanka, then I can have a couple of days of uninterrupted time to do that planning and to like really craft a beautiful experience. So yeah, it's a bit of a double-edged sword. I'm so excited to get over there and it's just the best place on earth, you guys. Everyone should go at least once in their life. But yeah, of course, it's keeping me rushing because I have to fit that in alongside all of the other things that I'm doing at the moment.
Well, I think you've definitely made the right choice by getting over there a bit earlier. And just sometimes it's an environmental shift, isn't it, that just helps you to be a little bit, get the creative juices flowing and be a little bit more in flow. I find even sometimes like if I'm here and working, and a lot of the time it's working from home, even if I just get out of my home and change the environment, I'm a little bit more productive. And so I think you'll feel like you'll get there, and hopefully, even though you'll still be working, it helps you to just like ground and be a little slower at least.
It's also, I think there's something about a perspective shift as well, because I have a lot of friends over there from when I was living there. And obviously the quality of life is so different. And so when I get to reconnect with my friends and, the things that we talk about and how we hang out, it's just, it really does put things into perspective because obviously in the West we have a lot more privilege and life is so different here. And then you go over there and things are so simple and, paradoxically, I believe there's a lot more happiness actually. And so.
And is that why it is your happy place?
I think so. I mean, I didn't wear shoes the whole time I
Mm.
was there, and that for me, like that brings me happiness. There's just, yeah, and the people and the culture and the kindness and yeah, it's like the cultural value, something about it. It's just different. And there's pros and cons to everything, but um it definitely helps to put my feet on the ground over there and just, obviously all we talk about here is how much we're rushing. And it's like, but why? Because you look at a different culture and the way that they live and you recognize how much they value just connection and looking after each other
Mm.
and community and just the simple pleasures. And that feels important to sort of have, to check yourself in that way.
And yeah, coming back to that word simple, like as soon as you even just say that, it just invokes like a feeling
Mm,
in me, like that feeling of the simple life is feels so foreign
mm,
in the pace that we exist here. But it was what you just said then reminded me a lot of. I'm always very inspired by Hugh Van Cuylenberg and the Resilience Project. I know you and I are massive fans of the Resilience Project and their podcast, The Imperfects, and I am often referring and reflecting back to that story where he talks about going to India and it's gonna the little boy's name's going to escape me now,
yeah,
but just
I can't remember.
how, you know, we are so fixated on like all of this achieving and materialistic and beauty standards and all this stuff. And over there, it was like this little boy was just so happy to just have shoes and go to school. And he was like, this and this and this, like
Mhm,
everything makes me so happy. And sorry if this is out of context for anyone, but we might link it in the show notes. I think the
mm,
Resilience Project is a really wonderful book to either read or listen to the audio book. It's so easy.
yeah.
Hugh Van Cuylenberg is a Melbourne guy and has done it. We're doing amazing things, but um, the way
Mm,
that he portrays his story and that story of him going to India and the simple life and the
yeah.
appreciation is just
Mm.
really special and perspective. It puts things in perspective.
Yeah, and especially with what because you just mentioned beauty standards again, which reminded me of what we're actually talking about today, which is I think that's a massive reason why that time in my life was so special. I'm not wearing shoes, I'm wearing the same outfit every single day. I'm not touching makeup or even skincare or anything like that because firstly, no one's looking.
Yeah.
And
No one
secondly,
gives a shit.
no one cares. And secondly, I don't know, when you're in the salt water, when you're in the surf every single day, at least once, if not twice or three times a day, it's just a different world. But before we get into all that, I'm curious what's keeping you rushing at the moment?
Uh, man, at the moment, finances, money, thoughts and stress. I um I admittedly am not very organized when it comes to my finances. I think I've talked about it a little bit in previous episodes. And yeah, it's just something that's always at the forefront of my mind because I don't carve out space to manage it or deal with it. It's not that I'm not in a healthy and abundant financial position. I'm very grateful that I've got great work opportunities coming through and I'm working and earning money and that sort of side of things is fine, but it's more so the management of like
Mm,
taxes and you know, paying for things that are work related and keeping receipts and keeping it organized. And it's just a mess. I'm in such a messy state with it all at the moment. And I need to lodge some tax returns and I'm just avoiding it. And I think it's an avoidance because I maybe don't understand money very well. And I haven't grown up with a great money mindset and a very good understanding of money. So because it's something that I feel is hard, instead of attacking it, I
mm,
avoid it. That's always been my anything that's hard. I always am like, put that to the bottom end of the pile. But of course, you can only do that for so long before that pile starts spilling over into everything else. And so I just need to prioritize time and space to get on top of it. And that's been the other thing. I haven't carved out time for it. And I've been so busy over the last little period. So I've been working with my life coach again and sharing this information with her and just talking about how much it just occupies my thoughts and my mind and gets me quite anxious. And so she's like put a bit of a plan in place for me to just get on top of it. And it's been really handy to have Yolanda, my life coach, back in my corner again, just guiding me and keeping me accountable. And we've made a bit of a plan. So again, it'll be by the time this comes out, already have happened. But next week, I've got a pretty much a blank week in my calendar to just life admin the shit out of my life for a week. And yeah, doing my tax return and all of that stuff falls into it. And I just need to spend like a whole day almost in an aeroplane or something. Like I wish I was coming to Sri Lanka with you, but just a whole day away from my environment that's distracting at home. Like almost need to go and sit in the library and just put my head down and my bum up and just do it. Just do it. Because I know I'll feel so much better when I just do it. And then if I have a bit of a system where it's like once a month, I just consolidate everything and just create. I just need to create a process. And once I create a process, it'll stop occupying my mind and creating sort of unnecessary stress and worry. So yeah, it's that's the main thing at the moment. It's just very forefront for me, and I know that I have the ability to change that. I just need to do it. So yeah, watch this space. And the other thing is too, like I really want to become a bit smarter with my money. Like I want to start learning how to invest it a little bit better. At the moment, my savings just kind of sits there, and I know I could be doing so much more with it. I almost want to get like one of those frequent flyer credit cards so I can just be smarter with things. I'm not doing any of that stuff at the moment, and um that is going to be something that I really prioritize moving forwards, particularly this back end of the year, so I can set myself up for a really strong start to 2025.
Fuck, it's so hard,
Yeah.
especially when you don't, because there's so much to learn, and especially if you're not mathematically inclined
Oh,
as well.
mate.
Like, fuck, it's hard. I always joke because my brother, my oldest brother, I joke that he's like my mentor, my dog sitter, my financial advisor, my accountant, because he is so smart with that kind of stuff, and he's a business owner, and like he just gets it. And so I honestly, if I had $1 for every time I called him for some kind of money or accounting question, he would be a really. No, wait. Would
Man,
I get the
maybe I
dollar?
should need
Yeah.
to
See,
introduce me to Christian. Is it Christian?
yeah, Christian.
Yeah.
Yeah, shout out. He
Shout
would
out to Christian.
probably not be listening to this, but
Yeah.
anyway. But I feel so grateful for him, because if I didn't have him, I mean, I have an accountant and I do have a financial advisor, but sometimes it's just like those little questions that you just like need to clarify with someone. And anyway, so I wish you luck on your
Thank you.
week next week.
Financial advisor, that's
Yeah.
a massive part of what I'm getting onto. And it does make it, if you've got that support, lean into it, because I mean, I probably do too, but I don't know, I guess because I don't know, I'm so avoidant of it. I'd
Yeah.
almost just like, I don't even want to talk about it with anyone. But watch your space. It's all going to change.
Yeah, it's all happening. All right. So let's talk about beauty standards. So, as I said, this conversation sort of stemmed from me starting to go grey and recognizing that I'm going to have to start, no, not that I'm going to have to, but I'm probably going to choose to start dyeing my hair. And so, Megzy and I then opened
Can
up.
I ask you again,
Yeah.
just, I know you kind of mentioned it, but as somebody in your early 30s, how does that make you feel?
Which
The
bit?
going grey.
The going grey. Well, as I sort of touched on, I feel like I've dodged a little bit of a bullet, because I sort of expected that I would go grey a lot earlier than this. But I do feel like for me, this is going to be hard and fast. Like I've already noticed in the last sort of 6 months that like it's really happening. And I don't know, it makes me feel conflicted things. Like one part of me just could not care less, to be honest. I'm like, I don't know, whatever. We all go literally everyone will and is, if going grey. So I don't really care. The thing that bothers me is that I know that I am going to want to not just let myself go grey. At least not yet. Anyway, I'm 32, and not that any of this matters, but for me, for whatever reason, I know that I'm going to want to start dyeing it, and that annoys me. It annoys me that society has created this idea in my mind that I'm going to feel better about myself and more worthy if my hair remains brunette. And that actually annoys me. And whilst I could get annoyed at myself for caring so much, I actually don't, because I'm able to zoom out and recognize that this is not a me problem. This is a cultural, like a kind of societal problem that I think many people out there can relate to, especially women in their 20s, 30s, 40s, some. So I know that this isn't just a me problem. I know that a lot of people grapple with this. And I imagine there's probably gender differences as well. Like, I feel like for men, and I'd actually love to hear how guys feel about this, anyone who has gone grey perhaps earlier than they expected or wanted to. But yeah, there's like the perception of the silver fox, that like it's like hot for a guy to
Yeah.
be a silver fox. Whereas like for women, I think that it can be a really bold move to just let their hair go. I guess even like my mum, she's in her 60s, and you would never know that she is grey underneath her blondness. But,
Well, it's funny speaking about your mum and just the age thing, because my mum still dyes her hair,
yeah.
and she's got this little like mascara type thing, and she
Yes.
loves to just like do the little mascara thing over her, extra grey bits. Whereas my sister, who is in her mid-50s or nearly mid-50s, she's just got to this point in life where she has just fully embraced it. My mum and my sister were here earlier in the year, and I was talking to my sister about it, and she's like, it's just who I am. I'm going grey, and she would always be the same as my mum. She'd always dye it. She'd always try to cover it. But now she's just like, let it go. And I think she's just got to that comfortable age in her 50s that she's just like, I don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
Who cares?
And I really hope, and I feel optimistic that when I'm in my 50s that I will also hold that perspective. And also, no disrespect to anyone who doesn't, because again, I don't think this is a personal problem. I think that this is like a pressure that we just receive from what we think we should be doing based on the beauty standards that we're going to talk about in more detail. But I really hope that I get to that point where I just feel totally okay. And actually, I have a couple of guests in mind of people who I really want to bring onto the podcast who sort of really embody this idea of just not conforming to what the beauty standards as it relates to hair and makeup and so many other things. So I think that this will not be the first time that we talk about this.
Absolutely not. And I mean, conforming to, it's not just, like you said, it's just not hair. It's everything, skincare and nails and laser. And there's all these treatments and things that have just added to our to-do list, for one, to our financial output. But it's like, why? And to be honest, there is an element of, I feel good, right, when I have my nails done, and it's a little treat to myself. It's something that I do enjoy, taking time out to be able to go and, get a fresh set every now and again. And I like the feminine element to, having a nice set of nails. There is something about that does build a little bit of confidence in me, and it makes me feel good, and I think that that's important to acknowledge as well. But I want to maybe take it back and ask you, Zoe, where was it that you first felt the pressure to conform to a beauty standard?
So just before I answer that, we are going to come back to this idea of doing it because it just makes me feel more confident and feel good, because I agree with that. But I also came across something in a book that I'm going to recommend to everyone at the end of the episode that challenges that. So let's just bookmark that to come back to later. Yeah, so my relationship to beauty across time, I mean, I think for many of us, and in fact, I shouldn't say that because, maybe not, but for me, it really started with looking up to my mum and the way that she related to beauty and the way that she navigated her appearance and what she did in order to, quote unquote, maintain her appearance. And so I think for many people, and but maybe not, but my story definitely starts from looking up to my mum, who was, the feminine influence in my life, given that I grew up in a house filled with boys and men. And for anyone who hasn't learnt this, I have three brothers, and I was the only girl. So yeah, I looked up to my mum and her relationship to beauty and the way that she would maintain her appearance, and I guess that's where I sort of learnt that that's what it takes to be a woman in this world. And of course, when I was little, I wasn't thinking of it like that. I was probably just witnessing it and observing it and making meaning of it in my, through the lens of my child eyes. But I think I remember like really sensing way back then how exhausting it looked. Like, just to be so, firstly, conscious of appearance, and just like all of the time and effort that it takes or took to maintain that. So I think that created this sort of strange thing in me where I actually had or remember having a little bit of resistance towards my own sort of feminine self as I evolved and grew and developed. And I haven't, I guess, analyzed it in probably quite enough detail to speak to it really clearly. But I do think that kind of witnessing mum from a young age did create some kind of almost rebellion against what I was sensing were the standards without kind of knowing that. As in without knowing that they were kind of imposed standards from society, right? I didn't have that kind of insight back then. But I do remember, so many things about being self-conscious in childhood or probably more so adolescence. Like, have this really specific memory of being quite young and attending a co-ed school for the first time and recognizing that all of the other girls were shaving their legs, and like my mum wouldn't let me shave my legs yet. And I remember being in my PE uniform, like crouched down, wrapping my arms over the front of my shins, being so self-conscious that one of the boys or even one of the girls was going to see my hairy legs, and like that would just be social suicide. And I remember like going home to my mum and crying, like, I just want to shave my legs, and her being like, no, that's silly, like you're too young. And I really understand from her perspective. She was like, no way, that is silly. But of course, from my perspective, I was like, now I don't fit in. I don't shave my legs and therefore I don't fit in here. And for someone who's already 13 or 14 years old, who at that time of our lives, that's all we're conscious of pretty much, fitting into the social group. I remember how self-conscious I felt, and that paired with my teeth. So when before I had braces, which wasn't until maybe I was 14 or 15, I had very crooked teeth. And I remember one of the boys at school made a comment about, me looking like a vampire, which to be fair, I fully did. But, those little comments stick with you. And so I remember I would just stop smiling with my mouth open because I was so self-conscious of being in photos and people thinking that I looked like a vampire. Like, even as I say it now, it's funny, right? But to my child mind, who's so conscious about not fitting in, again, that was like really distressing. Um, and then, yeah, as I got a little bit older, I also remember like a really key kind of self-conscious time was my skin. And we touched on it a little bit in your episode where you shared about your psoriasis, but I had really horrific acne for quite a few years of my life. And as we spoke about in that episode, when something is on your face or your skin, which is the first thing that people see when they look at you, and there is literally nowhere to hide, that I was just, I didn't want to go out. I didn't want to socialize. I just was so conscious and of what people would think of me, to the point where I ended up taking or trying a lot of different kind of medications for that. And I ended up taking this medication called Roaccutane. Some people out there will know it, other people won't. But I believe in some countries it's actually illegal for women now because it's, I think there's been more research on it being quite, um, I don't know what, but let's say toxic. But I took quite a high dosage of Roaccutane for a pretty long time. And isn't it, a part of me feels so sad for that younger version of myself because I was so self-conscious about my face to the point where I was willing to put myself through the pain of being on this medication that essentially dries out your skin, to the point where my lips were so cracked and like, similar but very different, of course, to your psoriasis. My hair was so flaky, you couldn't have any sun exposure because your skin, was so raw. And then it got to this point where it wasn't just affecting my skin, and it was kind of, the idea was short-term pain for long-term gain, but it started to impact my mental health. And I know that that's one of the massive symptoms and one of the main reasons why people would avoid taking this. But I started to experience these hectic, uh, I guess, mood swings, maybe for lack of better terminology. But there was a kind of turning point, which was the moment where I had to stop taking it, where I came home from school one day. So I must have been in year 11, I want to say, when I was taking this. And something, I don't even know what came over me, but I was so distressed. I remember being on the floor like a child, kicking and screaming. And my mum and my family were so confused. No one knew what was happening. I didn't even know what was happening. I was like crying and screaming. And then I just got up and started throwing all of my possessions off the balcony. Like my shoes and I like remember I threw my school shoes. I was like throwing stuff off the balcony of our house. And that was the point where my mum was like, "Oh my gosh, okay, we need like this is not this this
Hectic.
is not happening." So I came off it immediately. I never took it again, and a blessing that it actually completely transformed my skin in the end. So was it worth it? Probably not. But did it help? Yes. But I guess the point is that I wish I could go back to myself at that time and just be like, it doesn't matter. Like, acne is just a part of growing and developing, and it's okay. Everyone experiences it. And yes, this might be now, but this isn't forever. But instead, I kind of punished myself through going on this medication, which, then later down the track, I had some other kind of women's health issues. And I couldn't help but question if it was something to do with that. And anyway, so throughout all of that time, that for me, like just this word self-conscious was like dominated my psyche. And I think that created a really sort of, it just felt really challenging to create a relationship to my own femininity and sense of self, because I had this belief that I wasn't enough. But then simultaneously, I also had this sort of weird rebellion against the beauty standards because of what I'd observed growing up. And so I don't know, I kind of just identified with this more sort of tomboy kind of identity, and that really carried me through. And it's only really been in the last couple of years, to be honest. Like, I want to say sort of 5 to 7 years that I've started to really give myself permission to connect with beauty and femininity. Is that how you say it?
Mhm.
Femininity and makeup and fashion in a way that I can do so to actually express myself, as opposed to just feel like I'm trying to keep up with everyone else to be enough. And that's been a really beautiful experience, because it feels nice to actually, just feel confident. And actually, I'm way less self-conscious these days. And that's because I've done a lot of work on myself. And um, yeah, so now I engage with things in a really different way, but now I'm almost tipping to the other end of the spectrum, where I'm starting to question it all over again and think, hang on, now I've really bought into the narrative around what it means to be feminine, and how that the price tag that comes with that. And we've sort of made a list here of all of the things, right? It's like nails, waxing, laser, hair care, shampoo, conditioner, makeup, skincare, face washes, moisturizers, getting your eyebrows waxed, threaded, tinted, getting your eyelashes done,
Fuck,
tanning,
so much.
self-tanning, like, and that doesn't even include fashion, right? And clothing and shoes and seasonal changes, and oh my goodness. Yeah, so now I'm at this kind of other turning point where I'm really starting to question all of that. And I think that that's sort of an ongoing process, and especially, this idea of aging and anti-aging. And again, these are such massive topics that we can't cover in one small podcast episode. So we will come back to certain themes, and I'm sure we'll do them more justice. But yeah, I'm certainly in this phase at the moment of feeling a little bit frustrated by all of the things that I feel I have to do in order to kind of feel feminine and keep up with what everyone else is doing. And it's this double-edged sword, because I feel so nice to feel confident in my skin and express myself through clothing and makeup and all of these nice things. But, on the other end of it, it's also like a pretty deep frustration.
Yeah. And it does, it does come at a cost as well. And then it sort of sometimes is quite out of alignment, right? Like we are, you
Completely.
mentioned the word tomboy, and that is the persona that I really identify with. Like
Mm,
I was the same. I grew up very, very removed from this idea of having to be this feminine, beautiful, like makeup hair. That just wasn't me. I grew up in Darwin. I grew up without my shoes on. I grew up running amok, climbing trees, and basically just being a little bush rat. Like that was who I was and still am at heart. And it wasn't until I would say for me, I reckon I would have been about 18, 19, you're coming out of high school and, even just going back to high school and that comment about having vampire teeth, it just makes you realize like how important it is to just be a good person and
mm,
not be judgmental. And I know that most people that I spend, well, actually everyone that I pour energy and time into now as an adult, I don't have time for anyone who isn't kind and respectful of other people. But when you're a kid and like bullying is so prevalent in schools, and I've got lots of little nieces and nephews that go to school at the moment, and it makes me so frustrated and sad that young kids still experience so much bullying and being picked on, and because you just don't realize how much these words and these comments just live and exist inside that person forever, and ultimately is a massive part of the reason why we have feelings of insecurity and not being enough and lack of self-worth and all of that kind of thing. Because I was the same. I had shocking teeth as a little kid, and I didn't get braces put on till I was in my early 20s. So I really grappled with that, which I spoke about in my psoriasis episode a little bit. But when we put so much emphasis on our appearance, and when it's the first thing that we're usually judged by, and when your appearance is then impacted in some way, whether it's through acne or your teeth or whatever it might be, that word self-conscious is just, it's such an awful feeling to grapple with. And I just send so much positive light and love to anyone that does grapple with insecurity and lack of self-worthiness. And we all do to a degree all the time, but when you're really in it, it's tough. It really, really is tough. So yeah, just I guess it's just a little mindful reminder. And I know that most people don't even need to hear this as a reminder, but words really stick. And it's not nice to make comments on other people's appearance if they're negative, especially.
Yes.
But yeah, sorry, were you going to say something?
Oh, I was just going to ask you, like, what's your relationship to appearance and beauty been?
Yeah, so for me, I mean, yeah, there are a few little comments at school, the teeth, but also not really growing up very feminine as such. Like I really, enjoyed going out every now and again and putting a little bit of mascara on. But geez, back then it was like very much about like the thin eyebrow and the two little strands of fringe that would be at the front. It was very different vibes back then. But I didn't really care about it growing up in Darwin. It wasn't really a thing until I moved to the UK. I moved there when I was 20, and I'd finished school, and I sort of started working a little bit in like the nightclub scene and going out, and then realizing that I had really small boobs and that I felt like I always needed to have a push-up bra. And I always really admired this like Victoria's Secret sort of image that we're sold because, especially as an Aboriginal, like First Nations woman in this country, you're not really seeing yourself anywhere, to be honest. Like I grew up reading Dolly magazine and Girlfriend, but I was never seeing myself in those magazines. So I was a bit rebellious to that. I'm like, you know, but then in the same breath, you're kind of wanting to fit in and like all that stuff that you said about wanting to be part of a social circle and, you know, and especially in our generation, there was such a lack of diversity in terms of body image and beauty. You were always only ever seeing the same figure and the same skin tone, really. And so for me, it was always like that Victoria's Secret show every year. I like frothed that so hard. And then I felt like, oh, I need to have bigger boobs. And I really queried, do I want to get my boobs done? And I went down this path when I was 19. Because then I started to get into a few like little model competitions and stuff like that after school, and won a few, Ralph magazine, Zoom magazine competitions, and would like go to the Gold Coast and do all these.
What?
Oh my God, I have to show you. Actually, I'm going to find some photos. I like done some Zoom magazine photo shoots and stuff.
Yes, you are.
That
Thank
I'll
you.
make sure I get for the edits of this just to show wow, what I looked like back then. And that was when I started to care, and I was like being around all these other girls in these swimsuit competitions and realizing that I had small tits and I felt really left out. And I was like, okay, I'm going to need to either get my boobs done or the decision was to go overseas and travel. So obviously I chose to go overseas and travel, but Jesus spent some money at Victoria's Secret in the push-up bra department and stuffing chicken fillets in my bra. Like that was a big thing for me. I was really self-conscious of having small boobs. And then I lived in the UK, and the beauty standard over there, I mean, coming from Darwin, it was like a whole nother world. Like again, in my early 20s, especially while I was traveling, a lot of my time was spent working in the kind of hospo scene. So, you're out a lot, you're in nightclubs, and particularly the first place that I moved to when I went to the UK was Manchester, which by the way, like was some of the greatest times of my life, like early 20s, fun, traveling, freedom, like very grateful that I got to have that experience. But, I'm working in these nightclubs and hosting booths where like some of the Manchester United football players would come in and everyone is just so glamorous and dolled up. And I'm just this little bush rat from the NT that just like doesn't brush her hair and like literally barely owns any makeup. And, I start making friends with some of the crew over there and made a beautiful connection with so many beautiful, I've got so many beautiful friends over there. But yeah, I really felt like I had to do the most to fit in. And that's where I started like, every day before I leave the house, I'd chuck on a strip of eyelashes. I'd never leave the house without my push-up bra on. I was starting to go to solariums because I felt like I needed to keep up with like the tanning. Nails, like that was where it all began for me, my late teens to early 20s. And then for that period of my life, it was very much about fitting in and feeling like I had to conform to be accepted into this group, especially over there. And I remember vividly one of my best friends, she'll laugh, Sarah, she came over to see me in the UK when I lived in Manchester. She'll laugh just listening to this back. We were in this nightclub and like I was just so trying to fit in, had like hairbrushes and like makeup and all this shit in my bag. And she's also from the NT and we grew up exactly the same, like very minimal care factor for that kind of stuff. And I was like sitting in the middle of the club and I've like got my hairbrush, like brushing my hair, got my makeup, like putting lipstick on, and she's just sitting there watching me. She's like, who the fuck, like, what are you doing? Like, who are you? But that was just, I was consumed by it. Anyway, I came back. That was just a little bit of a period of time. And then I came back and then I went through that whole psoriasis journey, which I shared in previous conversations. So if you haven't listened to that yet, go back and listen to it. But then that really was a whole nother journey with self-esteem and what I went through with that. And I think it's an element of, like you said, you get older, you get more aware, you give less fucks. And so now it's like come full circle where I definitely, now I'm in my mid-30s, I care way less about all of that sort of stuff, but I do enjoy I do enjoy, you know, going and getting my nails done, and I'll go to the hairdresser probably like 3 times a year and have a little chop and those little things. But I do it because it makes me feel good.
Mm.
But sometimes I'm like, when I just did the calculations of how much money is spent on all of this stuff, I think I calculated it. So hang on, let me have a look. Hair is usually about $1,000 or just over a year. Nails is anywhere between sort of 700 to 800. Brows about 600 to 700. Laser, well, I get full body laser. That's $300 a pop every time. So when you calculate that over the course of 12 months, ends up being about 2,500. Skincare, makeup, it ends up being like almost up to anywhere from sort of 7 to 10 grand, and I'm on the lower end of the spectrum, I would say, with upkeep.
Well, you're higher than me, to be fair, because I also did my calculations, and I am I would say a little bit more minimal than you, but mine came up at about 5 grand. But I reckon there is so much that I'm missing out of that.
Yeah.
Like that's just what came to my top level mind as we were just quickly banging it out. But like, and it's not just the money, right? It's the time.
It's the time and
The mental load
the
too, of
mental
keeping track.
load.
We are just actually, sorry to cut you off, but Amy, who's sitting behind the screen, she's going away. She's like taking a little trip. And so we've just been talking about all of the appointments that you need to book in before you go away, because of course you want to feel upkept and good before you go away. And then it's like, God, you just like have to rush to relax.
It's funny though, but it poses the question like, are you doing it because you feel like you have to do that, or are you doing it because it makes you feel good? And I think that there's a really important factor in there to note that, like, if you're doing it because it makes you feel good, which is where I think I've gotten to with it nowadays. Like, I genuinely do feel better if I, go and get my brows done, because my brow, she's one of my absolute best mates too, Katrina. Call her Brad. Shout out to you, Brad, if you're listening. But I actually love going to see her because it's a bit of a social outing too. Like, we have our little catch ups every 4 weeks, but she's always saying to me, she's like, fuck you, you're hairy. Like, people aren't coming to me this often. Like, why? My brows and my moustache grows back so quick. And I'm like, far out. It's so annoying sometimes because I'm like, it's the time. Like, as much as I do go and enjoy seeing her, but it's like that hairy period in between. Like, I'm in a bit of a hairy phase at the moment. Like, the brows are a bit too bushy for my liking.
Oh.
But, each to their own with that kind of thing, because some people just don't do it at all. And women coming from a feminine perspective, some people don't enjoy doing any of that stuff and getting your brows done and your moustache waxed and your fanny waxed and your underarms waxed. It's like people don't care about that stuff, and each to their own. But it's like, as long as you're doing what makes you feel good and you're not doing it to feel like I'm not enough, so I have to do this. I think there's a big
Yeah.
difference.
Yeah. And I think I totally agree with you. I think the underlying message here is that it's okay to want to take care of yourself, and it's okay to like makeup and to love fashion and to enjoy the process of getting your brows done and doing your nails. Like, that's fine. But it's about being really clear on the why. And in my little bit of research that I did for this episode, it's quite interesting, some of the perspectives out there on that. But before I go into it, I just can't help, I'm laughing about this push-up bra thing, because any of my mates out there listening will have a visceral reaction when I mention my water bra, because I used to have this bra. It actually was my mum's that she gave to me. Keeping in mind my mum is tiny compared to me, but we're both a part of the itty bitty titty committee.
ITBC, baby.
And she let me have this water bra. And when I don't know, people out there have probably had their own water bra, but it was quite literally a padded bra, but it was filled with like water or gel. And I would not go anywhere socially without wearing my water bra, because I was like you, so kind of self-conscious about having small boobs. But now I feel like they're my greatest asset.
I froth them now.
Oh my goodness, not having to, because I have friends who are on the other end of the spectrum and it causes them a lot of grief. Actually, I know that exercise and movement is like more challenging, and so now I have this real sense of gratitude actually for my small chestedness. But isn't it so interesting, like the lengths that you'll go to just to fit in based on what you're seeing in the media or what your friends look like or what you're doing? And gosh, it's just.
And again, it goes back to that kind of discussion around age versus levels. Like, because I really think, like, what I said about pondering about getting my boobs done back in my late teens, early 20s, or the decision to go overseas, because I, had a little bit of money to go down either of the paths. I'm so glad. My parents are so glad that I didn't
Great
go down there.
choice.
But again, each to their own, because I have lots of friends who have their boobs done and I love their boobies. I always give them a beautiful big squeeze and they're gorgeous. But for me now, I've got to this point that I am really grateful that I, for myself, made the decision not to do that, because it was in that, when you zoom out and you get some experience in life and you learn more about yourself. I realize now that version of me, that was such an insecure version of me. And now if I was to say to that girl, that girl would admire me now so much.
Yeah.
And I would just say to her, like, babe, your tits are beautiful as they are, and you don't need to do that, especially. And that was what it was. It was the need for feeling like I need to fit in. So I'm grateful that that didn't happen for me at that time, because now that I've progressed through all these different levels in life, ages, as we like to refer to ages, levels now, I've learnt so much more about myself and how, like, that stuff just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And it's not until you get some perspective and some life experience under your belt. And
But isn't it in like just, it's so true as you mature and you gain more perspective. But reflecting back on what I was witnessing when I was little, it's almost like I've come full circle, because I think what I was witnessing in my mum, I just couldn't, it didn't make sense to me, because I was like, you are so beautiful, not because of how you look, but firstly because you're my mum and I love you, but I couldn't make sense of it. I was like, why won't you leave the house if you don't have makeup on, or if your hair isn't done in the way that you prefer it to be? Like, it doesn't matter. You're so beautiful. And then here I am, and now I don't leave the house unless I've brushed my hair and, to a certain extent. And, but then it kind of comes back full circle where you're like, oh, wait, actually, I'm enough. I'm actually enough. And I might forget it sometimes, a lot of the time actually, but in those moments of perspective, it's like I'm enough as I am.
And it goes back to, I think we've maybe talked about it before as well, but no one is actually judging you
Yeah.
except you, right?
Mm.
Like,
But I don't know, aren't they? I actually feel like with
mm,
this they are. I feel like with things like acne and like these
mm,
sort of things that are like everyone can relate to the horrificness of having a skin condition. I feel like in that context, we are not judgmental. We believe that we're going to be judged, but you have to be a pretty nasty person to like be seriously judging someone's acne, and that's not to say it doesn't happen because I know it does. But I feel like with beauty stuff, like it almost categorizes you or
mm,
something. I feel like it's a status thing as
mm.
well. It's like the more fashionable your clothes are, the higher you are on the social ladder. And I know that this is totally false, by the way, but I do feel like
Yeah, there is
I
an
do
element of
think that
judgment.
there is an element of judgment when it comes to beauty. Like I do, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a good point to ponder on. And you are right. Like, it's weird because I try to think, how would I
Yeah,
think if I saw somebody that rocked up with hairy brows and, you know, whatever, like scruffy hair? I
yeah.
would not think twice.
And now that you
But
say it
then,
like that, of course. And I think it's what's that thing where it's like you think that everyone's looking at you and judging you, but everyone's too preoccupied thinking about
yeah,
themselves. And I definitely agree with that. But I do think that there is this sort of broader like
pressure.
pressure.
Yeah.
And so maybe let's come back because I feel like we've kind of teased this a little bit. But one of the comments that you made before was around I do these things for myself because it makes me feel good. I do it for myself. I do it because it makes me feel confident and happy.
And only nowadays though, because I
Yeah.
definitely didn't. It's been a process to get to the point of it being for enjoyment and
Yeah.
for for making me just feel good.
Yeah. And I really resonate with that. I agree with that actually, but then I read this really interesting thing. So,
Hit us.
yeah, Megzy and I decided like in this episode we really want to make sure we share some sort of tangible resources with you guys. So, I had this book that I read many years ago now, which is sort of related to beauty ideals. It's also very much related to body image. And it's important to note that we're going to do a separate episode on body image. We know that it's hard to separate a lot of these things because they're all so connected. But as I said it before, we can't cover everything in one small episode. But there's this book that I read ages ago called Beyond Beautiful, a practical guide to being happy, confident, and you in a looks obsessed world. I wish I could remember the author. I'm really sorry. I'm not going to be able to credit the author. But
That's okay. We can put it in the show notes.
yeah, we will do that. So, one of the chapters in there talks about beauty standards and beauty ideals. And there's a little kind of section in here, and it says, why I'm just doing this for myself is bullshit, in inverted commas, because we often say that. I'm just doing this for myself because it makes me feel good. And it's kind of long, so I don't know if I'll read the whole thing. Maybe I'll read it and we can chop it. We can chop bits if we feel like this goes for too long. But she says, interesting, a lot of women don't realize how much the portrayal of beauty in the media affects them. In a study conducted by Dove in 2010, 72% of women said they feel a huge amount of pressure to look attractive.
72%.
However, the majority of those women believed that any pressure they felt, they put on themselves. Only 17% admitted to feeling pressured by society. Then she goes on to say, but let's get this straight. Just because it's in your hand that's reaching for the razor every morning does not mean that society had nothing to do with it. Just because no one is holding a knife to your throat to force you to drop the cookie or call up the beauty doctor, it doesn't mean that you are making those choices from a place of freedom. Sure, you're free to stop wearing makeup, to stop shaving, to stop wearing bras, to stop dieting, to stop doing everything in your power to look attractive. But what you, as a woman, are not free to do is to stop any of these things without incurring the consequences. Scrutiny, comments, fewer opportunities, and even outright body shaming. Feeling uncomfortable when you've gained weight, aren't wearing makeup, or didn't shave is a consequence too, but it's an indirect one. If you were stranded alone on a desert island, do you think you would care one bit about your belly pouch,
Absolutely not.
your side profile, or your hairy legs? No. If you hadn't have grown up in this culture, you would have never even had the idea that something as inherently natural as leg hair could ever be a detriment to your well-being. And then finally she goes on to say, of course, No one wants to be a puppet without free will. Admitting that I feel really bad about my body, or I spend a ton of time and effort on my appearance, or I'm getting this nose job or liposuction or breast lift because I've learnt that beauty matters in this society, like that clashes with our value system of wanting to feel free. But if we want to reduce the pull that our society's beauty narrative has on our daily lives, it's crucial that we acknowledge that the ideals we are judging ourselves by are not our own, because only then can we start distancing ourselves from them. Yeah.
I'm so glad you read that whole thing.
Yeah.
That's powerful, man.
And when I look back at my time in Sri Lanka, I think that's exactly it. Why that time felt so special, because no longer was I bound by feeling less than because I wasn't wearing makeup.
Same as me in Darwin.
Exactly. Exactly. Um, there's also a series of reflection questions in that book at the end of this chapter. And I thought I'd just read a couple of them now. So don't feel like you have to remember these, because I'll take a screenshot of these and link them in the show notes. So even if you don't read the book, you can still have access to these questions. So, question 1: when was the earliest time you remember being concerned with your appearance? Did you attempt to improve your appearance as a child or as a teenager? Did your parents ever outwardly criticize any aspect of your appearance? Was there anyone in your family who always got a compliment on their looks? How did that make you feel? Oh, this next one's so good. Did you witness your mother or other close female family members being concerned or preoccupied with her appearance? Yes. Did you get bullied by other kids because of your appearance? Were there any comments that your friends made about your appearance that stuck with you? And so those can be big questions to sit with if you've never explored or gone back in time to look at those kind of crucial periods of your life. So I just really kind of err on the edge of caution there. And if that feels like that might be too overwhelming for you to explore on your own, please engage with a therapist or a counselor or someone that can kind of guide you through that. But if you feel comfortable, sometimes it can be really, really enlightening.
No, it is. That it can be. It
Oh, it
can be
is.
really
Oh, yeah,
enlightening to
really.
sit
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Or really
and
insightful to.
insightful, enlightening, 100% to sit with your journal and you might not be able to do all of them at one time because who knows what will come out of your
Mm,
mind and your heart when you start to address these questions and actually start to reflect, because so much of what we are conditioned to feel and believe from those key earlier periods of our time on this earth influence who we are and our ideologies and beliefs today. And so
mm,
it's a wonderful tool to be able to sit and have really thought-provoking prompts like that. So don't hurry through them. If this is something that you're really curious about, I would really recommend
mm,
taking time and, maybe it's once a night over the course of a couple of weeks, you sit with a cup of tea or wine or whatever suits you and actually just ponder on it and journal to
mm,
to each of those questions. Come back to it.
mm.
Because yeah, it can be very enlightening.
Yeah. And then finally, I just have one or two little resources, and I know you have some too, so I'll throw to you in a second. Um, because really, even with myself, right? It's like I hear all of this, I read that little passage from the book, and yet simultaneously, I don't think that's going to change the way that I engage with my beauty practices. I call them practices. That's anyway. Um, but there is a quote. Well, I don't know if it's a quote, and I'm certainly not going to get it word for word, but a friend of mine, Eri, has a podcast called Pretty Hard. She owns a makeup brand called It's All Fluff, which is really around shining light on our beauty standards and sort of trying to encourage people to break the mold. And I was a guest on Eri's pod, and I remember that their kind of tagline is something like this: that it's okay to feel more with makeup so long as you don't feel less without it. And I just love that, because there's a lot of permission in that. It's like, to your point, it's okay to love going and having a chin wag with your brow lady and
Brad.
with Brad, and to enjoy getting your nails done. And it's okay so long as when you don't engage with those practices, that you don't feel worthless or like you're unlovable or like you're not going to fit in anymore, because it's just not true. And anyone who does deem you as less because you aren't engaging with those practices probably isn't the kind of person that you need to have in your life. But I do encourage anyone to go and have a listen to the Pretty Hard podcast. They've had some really great guests on there, and having some really vulnerable and insightful conversations around, lots of different people's, um, relationship to beauty.
Love it. And I think another thing, again, just to reiterate it, if I know we've referenced the psoriasis episode a couple of times today, but I did share something in that conversation that really helped me to get through that period that I went through of real deep self loathing, struggling with my worth and feeling really insecure and lacking any confidence. I would open my journal and I would write letters to myself. Again, just to reiterate, it's a really can be a bit of a weird and uncomfortable thing to do, but it just helps to shift the mindset sometimes. And because, although my mind was trying to trick me into telling me that I was like this ugly, gross, unlovable human, I knew deep down that I wasn't. I know who I am and I am what I have to offer and that I am a good person. And so by way of trying to remind myself that, I would write that in my journal regularly and say it, in fact, to myself. I would affirm that in the mirror when I would be looking at myself and my mind was telling me, "You're disgusting." I would be like, "I am beautiful." My mind's telling me, "You are so ugly." I am stunning, and just rewiring. And that was a practice. The affirmations and the letter writing was two of the tools that just absolutely helped break me through that negative cycle that I was in. So, really um, recommend exploring that as well if you're somebody that's just suffering with that internal dialogue that's quite deflating.
Mm, yeah. Yeah.
Good chat, Soga.
Well, there's so much more to say in this. As I said, I think that you can't really take body image out of beauty standards. They're sort of two in the same, but we really wanted to give that a separate bit of airtime just because it's a really important conversation. And, even this sort of broader understanding of aging and anti-aging and how that relates to beauty. And there's so much in this. So do trust that we will come back and kind of talk to these topics and themes in more detail. But for now, we'll put all of these little resources and things in the show notes and go and do your own exploration. And if nothing else, like just take a moment to reflect on how your relationship to beauty is tied to your self-esteem. And, if there is a little bit more space for you to show up in the world that in a way that feels authentic and that doesn't have to be tied to spending time and money on making yourself look a different way. See it as an experiment. Yeah.
Well, with all of that said, to round out, what is going to help you to slow down a little bit this week?
Yeah. So I wanted to share this for ages actually, and I kept forgetting. But for me, I have been re engaging with my notes from the universe. Are you across notes from the universe? Okay. So I think it would have been, I'm going to say nearly 10 years now, although don't quote me on that. Nearly 10 years ish, I signed up to Notes from the Universe. It is an email subscription, and once per day, I receive an email from the universe. And because they come in every single day, of course, I don't have the opportunity to read every single one. Like most days at this point, because I've got a bit much on my plate, I just delete them. But it's so interesting because on the days where I do decide to click and read, it hits. It hits every time, and it just gives you this little dose of perspective, and it's sort of really in service of reminding you around your infinite connection to all that exists. And it's something that, as I said, it's in my inbox every day. You guys can also go and sign up. It's just an email subscription. It doesn't cost anything. And maybe I should try to find one. Should I try to find one and read
Yeah.
one out?
Yeah. While you do that, I'll share mine in
Yeah,
the meantime, just
great
in the
idea.
interest of keeping things flowing. But it's funny that you've just said this about your notes from the universe, because for the first time the other day, it was Friday, it was the day before grand final day. I was at home, and obviously this is going to come out quite a while after, but just in the interest of the time that we are in recording. And I've just come off the back of a huge week, and I was like, I need to just take a moment here to catch my breath and just be present, because it's just been full on. And I actually got my bowl, my little singing
Oh,
bowl that I have, and I took my angel cards out and I pulled a deck of cards, and I got my bowl and I played it a little bit, and I did a little spread with my angel cards. And it's funny because it's very similar to your notes from the universe. Like, it was exactly what I needed to pull in that moment. And I often, I mean, for those of you that are, a little bit of the woo-woo inclined, the angel cards are a really nice opportunity to just, I don't know, I like to use them as a bit of a guidance and a reference point for just like where I'm at, and just grounding me a little bit. So yeah, I played my bowls, and I got my angel cards out, and it just reminded me that I've really lacked a connection to my spiritual self over this period of time. And I really want to regain that, and focus more on being more connected to myself spiritually. And when you're in the rhythm and the
mm,
race of life, and you're in the thick, that's the first thing to go, which I know we've mentioned before. But um, yeah, just prioritizing little
mm,
more moments for those connection pieces to the deeper spiritual side to myself, because I'm a
mm,
better person when I'm
mm,
practicing those sorts of things.
that's really beautiful. Yeah. Okay, so I found one. So I think it's called The Universe Talks. Notes from the Universe, The Universe Talks. So you can put any of those things into Google. Okay, this was one that I flagged. This is from ages ago. This is from 2022. When in doubt, Zoe, show up early. Think less, feel more. Ask once, give thanks often. Expect the best. Appreciate everything. Never give up. Make it fun. Lead, invent, regroup. Wink, chill, smile, and live as if your success was inevitable, and so it shall be. Happy global domination, the universe.
Oh, I'm gonna sign up to that. I like that a lot.
Yeah, it's good. All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Really hope that you guys got something out of this conversation, and, invite this conversation with your friends, right? Talk about it with your social network. Isn't it true that when we share openly about these things, that we tend to learn things about other people and it makes us feel less alone? Um, but also share with us. As I say all the time, as we say all the time, we'd love to hear from you. Please feel free to send us a DM, share your experiences with this. And, if you're happy for us to do so, we can then reshare them on the pod, because we really want to build a community of people who are open to having these conversations together. So if you like this episode, share it with your networks, share it on socials, chuck us a follow, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye. The content discussed in this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If any of the topics we've covered today feel overwhelming, we recommend seeking individual support. If you or someone you know is experiencing a mental health crisis, please contact Lifeline on 13 11 14 or 13 Yarn on 13 92 76.